If you claim asylum today, you can get a 5-year work permit and a social security card.
I think mass deportations of people who have committed crimes in the States or who have a criminal history should continue in perpetuity.
This was a bad time to have bond market weirdness, because if labor was already kind of at a point of getting ready to roll over, the immigrants were starting to react to that.
It presupposes some sanity coming from our government.
Trump had to start injecting in new policies to try to control the border because he was the victim of his own success.
Grok is actually very anti-Musk, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Ask Grok questions about Musk. It calls him a disinformation spreader and all this stuff.
If it can help that segment of the population and bring a bunch of jobs in, that's great. And then you might say, then you allow immigrants to fill in those double part-time jobs.
I was going to be my big question to Nate. If we're deporting all these people and we've shut off that flow of free labor, what's that going to do to the U.S. economy? Welcome back to The Future's Edge. I am Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. That's Nate Dallon. You guys are the best fan base ever. The interactions you guys give us, the DMs, the retweets, we are eternally grateful. The support for the show has been amazing, and that's because of you guys. We have launched the Finance Unfiltered newsletter on the Slice app. That's Finance Unfiltered. That is FU for short. No, it's not that. Whatever. It's the Finance Unfiltered newsletter. And that's where Mike Arnold, Bob Iaccino, and myself are all going to be putting trade ideas that we are doing. For me, they're not recommendations, they're trades that I am doing. Market commentary, a weekly newsletter on Sundays. It is very in-depth. It is much more in-depth than what we put on Twitter, and I love Twitter, and we'll still be on there. But if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, it will definitely be worth your while. Thank you. It's the Finance Unfiltered newsletter on the Slice app. It's in Bobby's bio on Twitter and my pinned tweet on Twitter if you're looking for it. Before we get going, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Independence Arc Farm. We always talk about how big food companies have compromised everybody's health, but nobody ever does shit about it. You can do shit about it. You can start patronizing small ranches like the one Marco has in Arkansas, grass-fed, grass-finished. You will not be sorry once you go to it. It's supposed to be healthier. Bobby, you believe it's healthier, right? Grass-fed, grass-finished.
Yeah, it definitely is. It doesn't mean that I eat it all the time because the grain-fed is sweeter, which of course what we're trying to avoid by eating.
What we're trying to avoid.
But I kind of go one on, one off on grass-fed. It's definitely healthy.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because some people and it's wonderfully delicious, but some people expect it to be like more delicious than grain-fed. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose is much more healthy and much more easier to digest.
Yeah.
Nate, did you know you'd be coming on talking about steaks and food? What is your favorite cut of meat?
No,
Don't tell me you're vegetarian.
Yeah, no, I buy all of my meat over the river. So like in Omaha, we're touching Iowa, right? And so I buy all my beef local from an Iowa butcher shop. And I eat them all. But I mean, if I'm going to a good steak place, I just rock the T-bone. I'm just young still.
Nice.
That's all that means.
Medium rare?
Yeah, of course. Or a little bleeding still. I'm fine.
Yeah. Between medium rare and rare, like rare is too rare for me and medium rare is sometimes not rare enough. Bobby, do you get medium rare or rare? What do you get?
In restaurants, I usually order medium rare, and then I don't mind if they undercook it. Yeah. I do mind if they overcook it.
So they do too, by the way. Knowing a lot of chefs, they get mad when they overcook something too. Even burgers at our place. Someone orders it medium and they cook it medium well by accident. They curse themselves out of it.
You know, when you're talking to your chefs, Jimmy, you ask them, I mean, if I send back a steak for too rare, I assume they just take that same thing, put it back on and give it back to me. As opposed to, you know, a medium rare, it's like, I mean, yeah, I'll eat it.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah,
I'm more interested in the butcher, less interested in who's cooking it up. You get the right butcher, it doesn't matter.
Do you live in a rural part of Omaha is a big city, but do you live outside of Omaha or in Omaha?
No, I live right on the western edge. So my in-laws live about 5 minutes from me. They've got 15 acres and then they're surrounded by farmland on all sides. So
that's
me and the boys, we roll out on the quads out there and stuff like that all the time.
That's really cool. I love
Nathan, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
You are an immigration lawyer. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. I have a theory that you're a lot busier now than you were the last time we talked to you. Is that theory correct? Or are you less busy since clearly no one is coming across the border?
Yeah. No, that's right. So this is a good question because last year, my partner and I, so this guy, Joel Hatch, we started our own shop in 2021. Right at the edge of the pandemic, we thought, hey, if we're going to start our own shop, we should do it now, just as everything opens back up. So spring of 2021, we opened up shop. Great. We kind of felt it in the air. We knew that there'd be a Trump presidency in 2024. So we made a bet. So everything we've done has just been to grow the firm, getting ready for these moments. And the answer is yes. We've got clients coming out of our ears. We're probably 7 weeks out if you want to get a consultation with us right now.
Bobby, can I say something real quick? Because I've pissed off a lot of people on Twitter who think that myself and you, Bobby, are some sort of MAGA crazies. I did vote. I voted for Donald Trump. I disagree with about 70% of his policies, and I've been very vocal about that. If the election were again tomorrow, I would vote for Donald Trump again. It was a binary, and the question was just, is Donald Trump good enough relative to the opponent? My answer was yes. On the immigration thing, I am not for any of this mass, large-scale deportations. I'm from an immigrant household, as is Bobby. I believe that what you really want to do is slow illegal immigration, stop illegal immigration, enforce laws in urban areas, get rid of all the freebies that we're giving them, and make people work for their supper like we've done for 1,000 goddamn years. What do you think, Nate?
No, I think that's right. I also think, we didn't talk about this last time, but there's 4 kind of conceptual buckets I talk to people about how you can get to the U.S. legally. So the first conceptual bucket is through family-based immigration. There's a million rules, but of course the key is spouses. That's where the majority of those come from. Then it's parents to kids. Technically, brothers and sisters can also petition, but those lines are so long. If you wanted to petition a sibling, and let's say you were in Italy, just for argument's sake, so you wanted to petition somebody from Sicily.
I'm going to be there next Thursday, by the way, but anyway, go on.
Jealous. Nothing but jealousy for me. So, yeah, you should tell us what the exchange rate is while you're out there. That'll be fun to see how the good old American dollar does in this post-tariff era. I'm excited. But, yeah, so if you wanted to petition a sibling, it might be a 12-year wait right now for the visa to become available. And the reason for that just has to do with caps. There's certain numbers of people who can immigrate per year, per category, per country. That's a whole bunch of pers, right? The administrative state is psychotic in this area. And so they haven't moved the cap since like 1996. So the countries have all grown quite a bit over the last 30 years, and the cap hasn't moved. And so they just have a backlog. So they approve a certain number of visas every year from Italy up to a certain point, and then they stop. Then they go to the next person in line the next year. So that's the first big category. The second is the myriad ways that you can try to get a visa and get permanent residence in the United States. There's probably about 100 different kinds of visas. Some are really technical. Some are like the supermodel visa, right? That's how Trump has his wife today. She came over on.
That's what I'm on too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so there's a bunch of different kinds. Most of those visas aren't for permanent residence. So they're temporary. It's like exchange programs with doctors, student visas, J visas, which are for like childcare. You get these au pair programs. There's a bunch of temporary visas, but none of them are going to legal permanent residence. The number of legal permanent resident visa categories is very small, and you really need to have some sort of connection to the U.S. So if you were just an entrepreneur from Sicily, no family connection to the U.S., it's going to be hard to find the visa category to get a green card today. The third category is the lottery, which will make Bobby's ears perk up a little bit, right? So there is a lottery program in which you can get into. That same thing, that cap has been the same since the 50s. So now millions of people enter the lottery each year. So the likelihood that you win is very, very low. And then category 4 is the overflow, and it's asylum. So if you can't fit into 1, 2, or 3, what does the law of incentives tell you? Well, if you don't fit into that bucket, show up at the U.S.-Mexico border, claim asylum. That's going to be your best bet to get into the country.
So I'm part of what I believe I'm saying this right, what they called chain migration in the 50s, right? So you mentioned it. My grandfather came here in, I believe, 1956. His sister was already here. From what I understand, she met a man when she was in Italy. They corresponded for a while. He came to Italy, married her, brought her back. And then about 10, 15 years later, her brother was allowed to come. And then her brother was allowed to bring his family, who was my grandfather, my grandmother, and my mother, right?
Yeah.
My dad, I'm not sure how my dad got here. It might have been, he had a green card, but he might have paid, Lucky Luciano. I don't know. But anyway, so both my parents had green cards. My mother right away became a citizen, like as quickly as she could before she was 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
She got her citizenship. My father who came here when he was, I think, 22 or 23, waited until his late 40s to become a citizen.
Little paisano pride there, right? Don't want to give up that Italian
I was
citizenship.
Somewhat, I think Jimmy experienced a decent amount of what I did, where I was the weird kid bringing weird looking sandwiches to school. And I had an Italian accent for the first couple of years, right?
Sure.
So it's funny you bring up Italy. My point on this is there's a 12-year wait, right?
Yeah.
My grandfather, from what I understand, waited about 7 years. And then it was another 4 or 5 before he could bring his family in.
Yeah. That could be.
In total, that's like 11, 12 years for the family to get here. Then my father had to come, which he didn't know my mother yet. They met here. But what I don't understand is the focus right now on whether people are illegal or undocumented, right? Which drives me crazy, rather than the focus being on, like, I kind of think I disagree with Jimmy. And so you might actually be convincing me, Nate, and not Jimmy, that I think mass deportations of people who have committed crimes in the States or who have a criminal history should continue in perpetuity, personally.
Don't disagree, by the way.
Complications. What's that?
I don't disagree, by the way.
Okay. Now, there's probably complications I haven't thought about, and that's what I'm asking you. But I remember when Tom, what's the border czar's name now? Tom Holman.
Yeah.
Somebody asked him, well, these are asylum seekers. He goes, and tell them to go to the correct place at the border and ask for asylum.
Yeah.
Tell them to go to the port of entry rather than the Rio Grande Gap or whatever the hell it is. Tell me I'm wrong on all of this or none of this.
Well, so part of this is just logistics. And so you're right to say that we've got some logistical headaches. So going back to these 4 conceptual categories, if you don't have a family member, you don't have a pre-existing relationship, so a business can't bring you over, and the lottery, you don't like the odds or you don't have the money to get in, what happens is the 4th bucket becomes the bucket. And so Tom Homan, I think he's never outright said it, but it's pretty clear that ICE and CBP, that's the Customs and Border Patrol guys, they think that most people who are showing up at the border and claiming asylum, they don't really need asylum, right? What they're looking for are jobs and opportunities.
I
right?
agree.
That's
that's what he thinks. I agree. He thinks that.
Yeah. And I think that, I sent you guys a tiny bit of data, but I think that probably makes sense. If you have a really tight labor market in the United States that pulls labor to us, right? This is just normal supply and demand. If you're Mexican and your cousin is telling you, hey, we can't get you a green card right now, but we've got a bunch of jobs for you here in the States, what are you going to do? You're going to make that trek up to the U.S.-Mexico border, ask for asylum. And we talked about this last time. The big error the Biden administration made was allowing for asylum seekers to get 5-year work permits, right? So you can get and this is still true to this day. Trump hasn't changed this yet, but if you claim asylum today, you can get a 5-year work permit and a social security card. So when you have tight labor market, you have a lot of people and a lot of opportunities. You just have lots of people looking for the best way into the country. And what do they find? Bucket number 4. So they all rush the border and they ask for asylum. They get a 5-year work permit, and then they go fill all these jobs. So this particular graph that we've thrown up here, this is from a group called the Burning Glass Institute. They're kind of a bunch of eggheads. They're not traders, but they try to create this fusion index about labor market tightness. They take, I think it was 6 different factors.
Can you explain the scale for me? Like, I'm assuming below 0 is a very tight labor market, or no?
No, I thought that was a loose labor market.
That's right. It's exactly inverse of that. So these fusion indexes, these academics like to just show rate of change over time.
Okay.
So an equilibrium market is that line at 0. Anything above is tight. Anything below is loose. So, of course, we have one of the favorite topics of the Future Edges podcast, which is the coronavirus nightmare of 2020. And you can see we've got the biggest self-goal in American history of creating enormous unemployment and a loose labor market for about 4 to 5 months. And then suddenly that snaps back with a vengeance. And that snapback with a vengeance coincides with President Biden's presidency. And of course, that attracts like moths to a light laborers. I didn't include it here, but there's this guy named Neil Howe. He wrote the Fourth Turning stuff.
I know the Fourth Turning.
Yeah. I pay for his Substack, and he made this comment. I can't verify this, but this is him talking. He thinks that almost every job created during the Biden administration was filled by an immigrant.
Oh, yeah. There's statistics that completely back that up, Nate. I mean, there was native-born jobs in the last 4 years are down. Immigrant jobs are up. But anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, think about that for a minute. So, like in Omaha, I can just speak to my own experience. The Omaha labor market at the end of 2022 got it down to 1.9% unemployment. So, if you've got unemployment that's sub 2%, that basically means that if you're unemployed, you want to be, right? And there still are people who want to be, but we were sucking in immigrants like crazy to fill this tightness problem. And then I felt the wind start to change. In May of 2024, I had a client tell me, hey, for the first time, my hours got cut at the meatpacking plant. And I was like, whoa. What do you mean your hours got cut? Because we were just on this tear. And they said, yeah, my hours got cut from 38 down to 28. And they took down the hiring signs. And so I thought to myself, I bet the border is going to start to respond and cool down. And sure enough, throughout 2024, we had these unbelievably high border apprehension numbers in 2022, 2023. Midway through 2024, they start to fall off a cliff. And of course, why would that be the case? Well, it's because the economy was rolling over. Employment started to die. Jim, I think you had actually talked about this, where you thought they might be goosing the data a little bit during the Biden administration on labor. I can confirm this just because I can tell you my clients told me, nope, the hiring signs are gone. We're now stuck in a place where we don't have enough hours, and they were starting to be short shrifted at work.
By the way, can I a quick time out some, because there's two things I want to add. By the way, when I did mention that I thought the Biden administration was goosing the numbers, and then Joe Weisenthal, he and I are friendly. We think very differently. When the last labor data came out, and he's like, yeah, there's revisions upward. Jim Iuorio, what do you say about this now? This is on the last one. And I'm like, I still think they're goosing the data. I didn't put a party on it. I hate being misunderstood by people when they think you voted for the Republicans, so you are this crazy Republicans. No, the Republicans can goose the data as well. Secondly, is the underlying thing of what you're saying here that the border slowing down completely is not because of Donald Trump, but it's because of the labor market shift? Is that what we're getting at here?
That's exactly what my contention is, which means two things. One, this was a bad time to have bond market weirdness, because if labor was already kind of at a point of getting ready to roll over, the immigrants were starting to react to that and stop coming to the United States. And now suddenly we have this tightness inside of markets. I think that's a bad combo. I'm concerned for the fall. I think it's could be pretty rough. A lot of space for the policymakers to do things to try to, hold the ship together. But it could be tough. Could be tough.
Okay. So, and then one more little question too. Are you of the same opinion that we need robust immigration? You mentioned an immigration system that seems cumbersome as shit. Yeah. And we want to get good people who want to outwork everybody who's been born here and who's soft. We want them coming in droves, correct? What could be done to change it?
Yeah. So this just comes down to the less the politicians have something to say about this, the better. I would prefer that employers have a bigger say in who comes and who goes, right? So in the perfect world, we wouldn't have a cap of immigrants. We would instead have a floating cap where we would say something like this. If unemployment in the United States spikes to 10%, we're not handing out visas in that kind of an environment. It's just not going to happen. Businesses aren't hiring, which means we should not be handing out any sort of ability to come into the country. But as soon as things get tight, so if you run into a 2%, 3% handle on unemployment, well, then sure, right? If we need the workers, let's have them work. I mean, who's going to take care of everybody when they're old in the nursing homes, right? Like that's perfect immigrant work. Let's go. And these people are excited to make it happen. So the business community can solve this problem for us. The issue we've had for decades is the administrative state has this layer that makes decisions that are either politically motivated or in-house baseball motivated, right? So Congress tries to mess with the cap. They think they know better than the market how many people should be coming into the country. Or the bureaucrats themselves start to create internal rules as to who they think should be coming in and coming out. And of course, that part of it, I mean, I could tell you stories all day about what is happening in our immigration courts because the immigration judges aren't independent. They're just admins. Like they don't have to respond to the U.S. Supreme Court. They just can kind of do what they want. So if you're in San Francisco and you've got an immigration judge, you will have a 180-degree different outcome than if you have a judge in Omaha, Nebraska, right? We have the tightest court in the country, and San Francisco has the loosest court in the country. And so if our judges tell me off the record, Nate, tell your clients to go to San Francisco. They're basically handing out amnesty there, right? And sometimes I recommend that. Most of the time they say, thanks, no thanks, we like Nebraska. But you see the point, even inside the
Nobody
administration.
says, no, we like Nebraska. That's crazy talk. I've been to Nebraska.
You compare it to San Francisco, they probably do.
I agree. That's a total joke. I like Nebraska and I hate San Francisco. Go on.
So
please.
two things. I had been on a podcast with Joe Weisenthal years and years and years ago, and he was a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
But him, along with the entire Bloomberg network, has become the most partisan, biased business network out there. And the only reason I say that is because CNBC at least has Joe Kernan, right?
Yeah.
I don't watch CNBC anymore at all. Everybody that watches the show knows how Jimmy and I feel about them. And Bloomberg, it's like every single headline now is negative. And Joe Weisenthal, everything that comes out of his Twitter mouth is, what do you Trump people think now? And I remember saying to him, why are we always talking about raising taxes? Why can't we cut spending? He says to me, Bob, list out exactly which programs you want spent.
Sure.
I said,
I'm ready for it.
Are you kidding me? The Florida senator, Charlie Crist, who's head of the budget committee, said in an interview, even I can't get the entire list of what's being spent. Yeah. I said, so you want me to list out what I want to cut? Okay, I have a different job. I said, why can't we talk about cutting spending? And he goes, well, you tell us what to cut. It isn't my fucking job, you dick.
If it was your job, you'd kick ass at that job, guaranteed.
They wouldn't even give it to Charlie Crist. Like Charlie Crist couldn't even figure out wherever all the spending was going. Now Elon and his Doge team, at least we assume, are looking and finding. But anyway, that's a sidebar. That has nothing to do with my question. And I apologize to our guest for that. I don't mean it, but I apologize.
It's a foul apology.
I'm looking at something from Grok, and you can tell me Grok is wrong, okay? Declines for border crossings began in mid-2024, which you said. Asylum restrictions and Mexico's enforcement are considered part of the reason that the illegal border crossings numbers went down. And by the way, Grok is actually very anti-Musk, which is very interesting. Yeah. Ask Grok questions about Musk. It calls him a disinformation spreader and all this stuff.
I think he did that on purpose. I love that. He just likes to throw curveballs. Yeah.
So it says Q3 from Q3 to Q4 2024 saw steeper declines with monthly lows down to 47,000 by December. Q1 2025 to Q2 2025, sharp drop under Trump's policies. Asylum suspensions, group deployments reported 8,300 encounters and an average of 10 to 15,000 monthly. So a drop of anywhere from 18 to 27,000 border crossings in total. Yeah. That's not the job situation, right? That is an effort to control the border. Or is it both?
Well, obvious. All human decisions are like a mismatch of like 30 things, right? I mean, It's hard to just pull out single variables on this. I would just say this: go take a look at.
Why I didn't like your chart a minute ago. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you just go look and you see March 2024, and you just draw a line straight down to where we are today,
it's downward.
It's all downward, but more specifically, I mean, it kind of just lines up nicely on a very particular trajectory. Now, I do believe in the Trump bump, meaning I think that it is perfectly appropriate for Trump to declare victory that, hey, I fixed the border problem. And because his rhetoric and the showmanship around immigration works, right? It absolutely works. Has he actually had to arrest people or treat them badly at the border to get them to stay away? No. Part of that's good fortune, right? Loose labor market, in my opinion. But his rhetoric matters. Vibes matter a lot. The narrative matters a lot. So he's completely flipped us on the narrative. Here's the key. Here's what we should look for. Let's assume that the most recent tariff moves are, in fact, as genius as some people think. Navarro's right. We're going to start getting these things realigned 18 months from now. Right. Well, yeah, I mean, we got opinions on this. By the way, I loved your guys' conversation with Tony Nash about this. I really like Tony a lot. He's a good contrarian thinker on this kind of stuff. But let's assume the best, rosiest picture for Trump in 18 months from now, we start to see an acceleration in GDP. Wages are going up. Everything's working right before midterms, right? Perfect land the plane. My hypothesis would be we're going to start to see uptick in immigrants at the border again. Now, same thing. I wouldn't anticipate or blame Trump for that. If you go fix the economy and make it awesome, you will get this again. You will get this phenomena again. So that'll be kind of the test. If Trump can keep the economy good throughout his term, we'll see numbers accelerate. If you go back, his economy hit the zenith at around the end of 2018, right? During his first term. And guess what happened? From the end of 2018 until they declared the pandemic or whatever, immigration and the border started to heat up. And so Trump had to start injecting in new policies to try to control the border because he was the victim of his own success. You get a hot economy in the US, you will attract human capital, period. Like that is what's going to happen. And so that's how we would test.
On your own chart, it flattened out. I'll show that again real quick so people know what we're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it's just this theory that right now we have a very strange labor dynamic where we have a lot of volatility, where things are going up and down quite quickly. This has to do with, I think, the boomers and the retirement age, right? So every day, more boomers enter full retirement and babies are born. So the number of people who are dependent upon the work age population in the country is worsening every day, just a little bit. And the boomers are expensive. Medicare costs, healthcare costs. They're still vacationing, haven't worked in 15 years, still going on the Carnival cruise, right? In that kind of an environment, we're going to pull more and more people into our labor pool. And that, I think that's just the situation we're in. I think that will go away. I think that these dynamics where the labor market is sucking people in at these high rates will dissipate by 2030, maybe 2031, because our labor pool will chill out.
So here's my follow-up to this. Part of the reason that I hope it's possible to control the border, like manically control the border, is I agree with what you say on the labor side of things. I really do believe there are jobs Americans don't want to do. And quite frankly, one of my theses is it's going to force companies to pay more for these jobs. You know, we all talk about these sort of ethical crime of all these profits being raked in by companies and they use them to buy back stock instead of maybe paying their janitor double, right? Or paying the guy in the meatpacking plant double what he's already making and getting people interested in those kinds of jobs. But number one, there's a generational problem. Sure. Somewhere in the range of 70% of kids under 20, when they ask what they want to do, they say be an influencer, right? That's what they want to do as a career, which in this room, only Jimmy's an influencer, right? So we're lucky he could tell us how great it is. But I'm just talking about as a theory, right? If these jobs start paying better, you can trigger some of them to maybe not spend good money after bad, getting a bachelor's degree in liberal fuckery. And the other thing is, I guess I don't wonder why people call me MAGA after listening to myself on this. But
they're still wrong.
The other thing is, I think in the same way that it might force corporations to pay more money for the manual labor jobs that will remain, won't it also force both houses to consider more legal immigration and to unclamp this tightness, this 12-year waiting list and everything? Couldn't we become more accustomed to that being the way to fix it as opposed to the Darien Gap?
Well, I'll tell you, I like professional wrestling. I don't know if you guys are into professional wrestling.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so I really like professional wrestling. Trump is actually part of the WWE Hall of Fame, right? You can go watch funny YouTube videos of him getting stunners from Stone Cold Steve Austin and stuff. In the wrestling world, we call this a heel turn or a babyface turn. So what Bobby just laid out is Trump came in as a heel. So he came in as sort of the bad guy, especially on the topic of immigration. He comes in, he's tough, he's got some rough edges. He talks a lot of crap in the media. He's being mean to people. He's deporting people. He's sending out Dr. Phil to go on ICE raids. I don't know if you guys remember that the first couple of weeks. Dr. Phil was in Boston picking up immigrants.
It's like a cartoon.
Yeah.
The whole thing is.
The showmanship on this, again, I think it's an asset to Trump. He comes in, he knows what his relationship is with the left, with the intelligentsia, and with the elites. People voted for him to break some heads. And the people who break heads are the heels. They're the bad guys. However, every good story, guys, needs a turn. So could Trump come in hot for 18 to 24 months, break a bunch of stuff, make a lot of people's heads explode, midterms come in, and then we see a switch where suddenly Trump, who is not against immigrants, he's married to an immigrant, one of his top advisors is an immigrant, J.D. Vance married a first-generation American, his in-laws are immigrants. He's surrounded by people who are immigrants. Vivek's family, immigrants, right? Like there's just a lot of immigrants in the administration. So I tell my clients, do not be surprised if we get mean Trump, bad cop Trump, heel Trump for 24 months.
Nope.
And then
Nate, I think your timing's off.
Okay.
24 months, we're already after the midterms by then. I think he's got to come across as kind and benevolent and someone who's affected positive change at least 4 to 5 months before the midterm election. Do you not agree with that?
Well, I could just imagine Trump and Chuck Schumer suddenly becoming old boys together. I mean, the switch to work with the Democrats could be so extreme that even if he loses the House and the Senate, he might say, I'm for the people, guys. I just want to be popular. I did all my hardcore stuff. I broke the system. I did all the hard work during my first 24 months. I'll work with Chuck Schumer to put the pieces back together.
So
I don't know.
For you guys watching here, I think the biggest takeaway for me so far, and this is what I'm going to remember, is that it was going to be my big question to Nate about if we're deporting all these people and we've shut off that flow of free labor, what's that going to do to the U.S. economy? But Nate's saying that's not the right question. He's saying, what's the U.S. economy doing to that flow of labor? I find that absolutely fascinating. That's a good way to describe it, right?
Yeah. And then just to finish off Bobby's question, which is, couldn't we do some common sense basic things so that the way to get into our labor pool isn't to be illegal? And I think the answer is, I think we could come up with 10 things right now between the three of us that would just make some sense. And I think that Trump can be that guy. Think Nixon to China, right? He was the China hawk. He was able to open the China door. If there was ever a guy who could say, I've got all the street cred in the world on immigration, if I say this is a good deal, you have to believe that this is a good deal.
Bobby?
Yeah,
I really too simple, but I think that might be it.
I think part of it is not, and by the way, I don't want this legislated. For the people who are listening to this and going, I knew Bobby was MAGA. I hate everything Trump's trying to do to force the trade imbalance to be balanced. That drives me crazy. It's crazy. Companies should be able to go where they want, do what they want, build what they want. When he talks about deducting interest rate deductions for auto loans, but only on American cars, I hate that kind of stuff. It's not, he was the least horrible of the two to me, but I do agree on like his core things, like stop the illegal immigration flow, but that has to be followed up with legal immigration. And I'd like to see some of these companies step up, and I'd like both your opinions on the probability of this. And maybe it does take things that I don't believe in, like incentives like this. Get these companies to step up and say, we're going to create training programs. And I'll follow it up with a quick story. We're going to create training programs. We're going to double the pay. We're going to have pensions again. We're going to have full health care for these people. And they're going to come and they're going to work. And some of them who've been trying to be influencers for like 5-6 years and are still making $130 a month off YouTube might actually go, you know what? Maybe I should put iPhones together. But anyway, to Steve Cook, he said in an interview 2 days ago,
Cook,
that the problem is the cheap labor story is not the China story anymore. They stopped being the cheap labor hub about 10 years ago, which I don't believe, because he's comparing it to maybe Vietnam or Thailand, or I don't know. But anyway, he says what they have is they have a skill glut that we need. And he described a certain skill. He goes, if I try to hire those people in the United States, I don't think I could fill this room. But if I try to get the people with those skill sets in China, I could fill a football field. They weren't trained. Chinese people weren't born with a particular tech skill set that Apple needed. They were trained making $3 a month by Apple, right? Now, I've got nothing against Apple personally. I've got an iPhone. But when these corporations try and spin it, the guys all out there saying this stuff about, Trump's breaking things and I hope he does a pause. They're all talking their book. That's what they're doing to me. So both of you, do you think it's possible? Chris Whalen called this a multi-decade project to actually make America competitive on a skill set basis first, and then make these companies realize it's more valuable to do these things here from a supply chain perspective? Or is that just pie in the sky?
I'll go first. I think it is absolutely reasonable, but it presupposes some sanity coming from our government. And we have not had a ton of sanity coming from the government. Again, with the Trump administration, there's been a little bit more so, but I've heard them mention nothing about doing things that would make so much sense like this. I think it's a wonderful idea. And again, maybe guys who have Trump's ear watch this show, Larry Kudlow, things, people like that. So, I mean, us talking about it as a start, I'm not saying we're that level of influence that tonight Trump's going to go, Bobby Iaccino was right. I'm saying it could happen tomorrow. Nate, what do you
give me credit?
Well, I have a question. Do we think that getting a manufacturing edge, getting the skill sets back up, how many potential jobs are we talking about creating inside of the market? Because if the answer is it's millions, Nate, we're going to get like 7 million new high-skilled factory jobs or something. That's one thing. I just don't know. That's not I don't know how to think through it.
I don't think anyone really does, right? It's just kind of a crapshoot. But the point of bringing in skilled immigrants is wonderfully attractive, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, because if it just gets back to this question of if we're at about 4% unemployment right now, again, goose number, probably, right? I think there's a lot of underemployment, especially for men. I don't know why this is, but a lot of men are working 2 part-time jobs right now. I don't know if you guys see this in sort of the less educated world. A lot of
read Richard Reeves' book of Boys and Men. He goes into it's quite amazing how some of the economic revivals of the last couple of decades have left men behind. But anyway, go on.
Right. And actually that's so to me, if the upsides to some of these trade policies, if it can help that segment of the population and bring a bunch of jobs in, that's great. And then you might say, then you allow immigrants to fill in those double part-time jobs because they will. That's their bread and butter. They'll hustle all of those things for a chance to be in the United States.
Real quick, I'm just going to give you guys a quick statistic. Tesla, as an example, has about 126,000 employees worldwide. It's estimated by Grok, again, that about 65,000 of them are already in the U.S.
Yeah. We're kind of already like the second largest manufacturing country in the world. So part of me is a little bit like, hey, we can squeeze some more out of this, but like, how much are we going to squeeze out? And I just don't quite know. But to Jim's point, you could say, let's go ahead and target higher skilled, simpatico immigrants to come to the U.S. What do I mean by simpatico? We're talking culture. This matters. We're in a
by the way, I was about to pivot hugely to culture. So go right along this, by the way.
Yeah, because we're in a situation where we have very low trust in our society. I think we can all agree everybody's a little on edge out there, right?
I'm completely calm.
Yes, things are great in Florida, nowhere else, right? It's difficult for me to know exactly the impact that immigration has on trust is it always causes trust to go down. That's just true over hundreds of years, different countries. Every study in the world says higher rates of immigration, societal trust will go down. How much of our predicament today is because of immigration versus other factors, I don't know. But if you wanted to create a bunch of manufacturing jobs and then you imported a whole bunch of labor to fill those jobs in this kind of environment, that would be political poison. I just have to assume. So getting back to Bobby's point, you'd have to sequence this properly in order to land the plane, so to speak, where you increase manufacturing jobs, left behind men and Americans take those jobs first. And then what's left on the underbelly of the economy, then we can start to bring in our labor force for. I think politically, that's the only way that would really kind of make sense in the situation.
Let's pivot to a cultural thing. I'll tell a quick story before I ask the question. So I live in Motorola land. Palatine was the headquarters of Motorola for years and years. And many, many engineers came over the last 30 years, and many of them were from Asian countries. In my neighborhood alone, very, an upscale neighborhood, but a lot of, decades old Asian engineers have been here. So at first, the people from, I believe it's Korea. No, the Indian people, the people from India, like they'd go for walks. The woman would walk behind the man. I think over several years, they started to realize that we don't really love that here. You know what I mean? So guess what happened? They adapted, and now you almost rarely see, and this went on for the first 15 years they were here. And now okay. And they used the dogs as pets. They would never even consider that. And now all of a sudden, but the point is they seem to be adopting more of our culture, which, by the way, when I said dogs as pets, it was not an Indians eating dog jokes, by the way, and it's Koreans who eat dogs, by the way, which I was at a dinner with 20 Koreans. I was about 26 years old entertaining them, and the conversation started to stall a little bit, and I go, so you guys eat dogs? And my boss was sitting next to me. I thought I was about to die. Okay, now I'm pivoting to Muslims, because Muslim culture, this is not any sort of third rail. I am fucking uncancelable. So don't even think people like, oh, he's criticizing the Muslims. I am going to criticize the Muslims because what I've seen of the culture, it seems to be a bit of a harsh culture. And they seem to adhere to a way that I don't like. Like they don't treat women, they treat women as second-class citizens. They treat the gay community as, fodder for throwing off buildings. By the way, this has all been told to me by different media outlets and different people. So I'm not even sure it's 100% true. My experience does suggest that there is some truth. Seeing what's happened in European countries, when there's massive culture clash between, I guess you'd call us a Christian nation before, which by the way, I'm not the world's greatest religious person either. But when the Muslims come in, it seems like it's oil and water. I don't care about pointing that out. I want to know what's happening. I'm not going to live under Sharia law, by the way. And I know places like, what's that town in Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan? There is places that the police don't go in already. Am I being ridiculous to suggest that some cultures are blend in better than others? Nate?
Well, no, because again, I mean, we have to be honest and say in low trust environments, bringing any immigrants, even if they are easy and simpatico with your local culture, it's just tough. And then the farther away the immigrant is culturally, in this case, the Muslim community, they're very far from us culturally. That is going to be extra hard. And so I think one of the things that could be done is increase the assimilation piece to coming to the United States. Right now, the closest thing we have to assimilation is a brief civics test during the naturalization interview.
Yeah.
Right? That's really it. It's not a
No,
class.
you should have to know the exact number of Joe DiMaggio's hitting streak that'll never be broken. Bobby, what is it?
It's 33.
No, Nate, what is it?
I don't know.
You two both back to your country of origin.
I remember.
Put us back on the boat. Yeah, it's
for those of you watching, it's 56. Anyway, go on. Yeah,
that's good. That's good.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, there has to be a way that our institutions can do a better job at assimilating and transmitting the best parts of our culture. Whereas right now, our institutions do the inverse. So we shy away from the best parts of our culture, and then we transmit all the lazy, overeating, bad ways of dressing, bad ways of living. Those are the things that get transmitted. Whereas the things that we should probably be holding up as great examples to other nations, we're not really supposed to talk about because it seems like we're being pompous or, it's somehow demeaning to another culture by saying like, hey, guess what? Equal right, equal protection under the law. Pretty good. It's actually pretty good. Like we're going to run with that. So I do think that we talk about the future. Next 100 years, 200 years, America needs to have an immigration assimilation policy that is far more expansive and aggressive than what we have right now.
Bobby, I'm pointing it to you because this for decades we've been told like you can't criticize other cultures. I can certainly criticize other cultures. I can criticize whatever the hell I want. I'm not running for office at this point in time. Bobby, am I crazy?
No, and I'll honestly never understand that. And I don't. This is supposed to be about Nate. I don't want to take. I already ranted a little bit, but growing up, we made fun of each other. Yeah. We had a group. We had a big group. We had a black guy. We had two hillbillies. We had a Chinese guy. We had a Mexican, and we had me. And they would just
not let Nate off the hook. He's an Irish guy with red hair. He'd have gotten the brunt of a lot of shit.
Here's the second funny part about that. Much younger than I just mentioned, I grew up in an Irish-Italian neighborhood, and the Italian guys bugged me because they didn't speak the language and they screwed up a bunch of Italian words, and it used to drive me crazy. Like they'd say, oh, I got to go home. My mom's going to make the gabagool. It's like, that is not a freaking word, dude. But it's like, just say it in English if you don't know how to say it. Anyway, I'm doing it again. I must be MAGA. But with that particular group, we made fun of each other. I remember my black friend, Jimmy, like, hey, Jimmy, get in the back. And we're going to, wow, black guys got to get in the back seat. And it was just funny.
When we laugh, right.
But there's serious things here in terms of the lack of assimilation that you bring up. And Nate, that's interesting because that's sort of a legal remedy to that, right? Where some of the proposals that are being put out there by people who know that we have to increase immigration at some point, as you mentioned, are saying a civics test and you have to learn English. Now, that would have disqualified my father from his green card, quite frankly. And he went to his grave with, still a very thick Italian accent. But he could talk to a banker. He could talk to a lawyer. He could talk to a judge. He had a good enough control of the spoken English word to get by. But, when you emigrate now, you go into not now, but then you went into an Italian neighborhood if you were Italian. You went into a Jewish neighborhood if you were Jewish. You went into a black neighborhood if you were black. And, that sounded weird. But you just, you understand my dad didn't have to speak English until he was in his mid-30s.
Right. That's right. I actually think everyone after this podcast needs to go home and watch the greatest American film, which is an immigrant story, The Godfather.
Damn straight.
And you can see, by the way, I do this when I teach classes at the law school here in Omaha at Creighton. I will show this, especially in The Godfather Part 2. It shows Vito coming across, going through the Ellis Island experience. And then you see just the story of what it was like to grow up in the 19s and 20s inside of New York in an Italian neighborhood. They're slowly working in English words, still mostly Italian. But then at some point, there's a little click where now they're more English speaking than Italian speaking. It's actually a beautiful kind of parable for what it means to be an American, right? And that to me, so just to Bobby's point, I wouldn't force a fluent English test on somebody from go because it would almost eliminate everybody over 30, right? So I actually do agree that having proficiency in English is important. I think that they should be able to get by, sure. But I think there's other parts of our culture, the intellectual parts, the like signing up for due process, the signing up for free market economics. Like, I don't think that's beyond the pale to both teach and then require kind of like I affirm I'm on board. Can I catch every liar? No. Could somebody get radicalized after the fact? Sure. Could the Democrats get a hold of some of these people and run them off the rails? Sure, whatever. But the point is, right now, we do almost none of that. And so we should do something.
Let me ask you, and this is mostly to Nate, but Jimmy, you too. Do you think it is still possible? My father came here. I don't know what he had in his pocket. He says 38 cents. I don't know if I believe him. But he came here and was a busboy at the Italian Village in Chicago. That was his first job. He was a busboy, right? He was 25, 24 years old, something like that. And when he passed away in 2016, he had a house with 5 bedrooms and a 3-car garage, and his wife had a Mercedes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the second and I was a part of this, the second we made him retire, he died shortly after.
Yeah.
Right. So he worked till his last day. Do you guys think that's still possible?
Nate?
I think the answer is a resounding yes. Look, I work with Guatemalans who crossed the desert 20 years ago, right? They have no status. And these guys are hustlers. They work roofing and snow removal in the winter. That's all they do. They don't have a skill set beyond that. And guess what? They slowly buy their homes. They buy cars. They get their kids educated. They send them off to college. It is disheartening for me to see the number of native-born people who don't see opportunities to build a life just by showing up and working hard, even if you don't have a skill. So it can still happen in our country. It does still happen in our country. But our cultural vibe is that, no, that's not possible anymore. And it's actually been hard for me personally, just because my empathy has really started to drop off cliffs. Because I have these clients
you got
who
no
have no advantage in the
you.
world. Some of them don't even speak Spanish, right? These Guatemalans from tiny towns up in the mountains, and they speak a dialect, right? And they're out hustling and buying their first home in their late 30s, but they're buying a home cash. Well, you hear the 19-year-olds say, I don't have opportunities. I'm like, guys, I don't have a lot of empathy for that, because I see this hustle by people who are basically doing it illegally all the time. And if you've got a social security card and you can show up and hustle a little bit yourself, I still think that American dream's there. It's harder now than it's been in the past. Part of that's cultural. Part of that is because of government oversight. I mean, my son just turned 11 a couple days ago, and he said, Dad, can I get a job now? I'm like,
that's awesome.
Child labor laws require me to say no.
And he should be able to get a job. I hate those child labor laws.
Well, but I told him, you can start a business.
Yeah.
We'll do the paperwork for your LLC. You want to pick up dog crap? You want to sell something on the street corner? Like, I'll fight you in county court if they think you don't have the right license or whatever. But like, he just looked at me like I was weird. He's like, why can't I work? Like, I don't know.
I wish you could. I started working at about that age, probably a little younger than that, and I loved it. I love feeling like I was important to the family. But Bobby, I have a couple answers to your question too, and I don't want to go too long. I moved into this neighborhood 33 years ago, and at the time, everyone has landscaping in my neighborhood. And by the way, nobody try to shame me on that. I'm glad as hell that I have maids and a wine cave and landscapers. I'm proud of it. So, but anyway, so the landscapers 30 years ago, every truck had, American names on the side, and every employee was an immigrant from Mexico. And then as the years went by, now every truck has a name like Rojas. Rojas is our guy. And every other truck has a name. Now the Mexicans own the business. And their children, who I've met, Samuel Rojas has become a friend. His kids are going to college, and his kids are going to a different path and not doing landscaping. Not that landscaping is a bad business. So the immigrants came over and did landscaping, and now they own landscaping businesses. And now they're their son's going to be an accountant for Ernst & Young. So the progression is still happening. And when my grandpa came over, they gave him a hammer to work on the Great Northern Railroad. And then before he could even speak English, they gave him a uniform and said, by the way, get on this boat, go back to Europe and start killing Germans, which I don't think was a great welcome for him too, but he didn't have a lot of choice in the matter. He was in the trenches. Then he came back and started learning. I remember him going, even in the 60s to 70s, going to classes at night to perfect his English, even 50 years later. So do I think it's still possible? Yeah, it was possible then. I think it's possible now. Absolutely.
So here's a story I think you guys will find pretty cool. Two quick stories. One, when we first moved down here, I live in Southwest Florida now, Nate. When we first moved down here, there was this house we were always looking at that had, it was a pretty house. It wasn't, you could tell had been there a while, and it was very well kept, and it had a huge front yard. And in the front were a bunch of work trucks, right? I don't know if they were landscaper trucks or whatever. It's just a bunch of pickup trucks with equipment in the back. 2 or 3 years later, we were driving down that street, and the street had been widened, and they're starting to build a frontage road to go to a housing development that's being built past that house. 3/4 of the front yard of that house we'd been looking at every time we drove by it was gone. And now there was a Bentley and a Mustang and Shelby Cobra GT.
Moving
and then
on
I
up.
saw the owner pull out, and he goes into his truck and he makes sure that he has his lawnmower that he wanted on the ground. He threw it up in the truck and he drove away, right? He bought his house.
That's right.
And then he hit the lottery. The second thing I'll tell you real quick, we have two cleaning women that come here every other day. I'm sorry, every other Monday.
I was thinking, wow, that's aggressive. Yeah, right.
Every other Monday, so twice a month, right? And they're in and out of here in 2 hours. They work like crazy. So we started giving them stuff. My wife and I recently both lost a lot of weight doing carnivore diet, right? And so we started giving them large clothes here and there, a piece here and a piece there. Thank you. Then one day my wife said, I was talking to the service. Those two have a thrift store. So we took everything out of our closet, put it in a box and gave it to them. And they're like, oh, they don't even look through it. They just took it they have a little thrift store in their neighborhood. I'm like, God bless you guys. That is amazing.
Yeah. So insofar as anyone on this podcast might be a Magastanian, I don't think that this is what the media has painted Magastan to be, because what we've just described is America. That's what this is. And the thing that's been so unique about our country is that we continue to have these stories. Our heritage is Bobby's family. Our heritage is Jim's family. I bet Jim's grandfather loved America more than anyone alive right now.
Loved it.
I totally agree with you.
He bled for it. He worked for it. And it was a point of pride that he wanted to perfect his English. Guys, that is the best of us. And so I really do think we're in a hard moment right now. I don't love all the ways that the Trump administration's been heel, right? And making life difficult for some of the immigrant families. I think it's a little over the top, but I think that this is a hard moment. It will pass. I think that the future is going to be very bright, but it's going to take some time. It's going to be a story beyond just the Trump administration. And the thing that I have a lot of confidence in is that America and its promise is ultimately what wins the day. Politicians have tried to screw this up for 200 years, and I think that we're going to be okay. There'll be some bumps, but we're going to get there. And we'll have a much better immigration policy by the time I'm in my 70s than we do right now.
All right. So who's the enemy right now? And I don't need people. Like, who's the enemy? What group? Is there an opposition that is just like no immigrants at all? So, like, who's the enemy that people like Jimmy and I have to get through to?
Yeah, I don't actually know this, because online there's a lot of trolling, right?
Yeah.
It's like a sport almost to make liberals' heads explode online. So you do see people saying some what I would just call nativist, sort of like don't dilute the bloodline kind of chatter. I do not know how to take
they're real.
I don't take it seriously, because I think most people are just trying to trigger folks. But insofar as that exists, and it does exist a little more on the right than the left, I think that's something that folks on the right could do a better job at, just sort of saying like, hey guys, I love making a liberal's head explode, metaphorically speaking, online. But like, let's back off of some of the real anti-American nativist stuff. I don't like that much.
I love that answer. Okay, I'm going to play us out. I will tell you one more thing. My grandpa, even in his heavy Italian accent, one thing that every time my family and I get together, we reminisce about one thing. Every night he'd be working in the garden all day. He'd come in and sit down at dinner at the dinner table, and everybody was yelling at each other and screaming, because we were Dagos who talk with our hands and our loud voice. And he'd just mutter, "Yous people are crazy." And we always, it's still in our vernacular, as "Yous people are crazy."
Love it.
Anyway, thank you, Nate. Follow Nate on Twitter at Say it.
Just Nathan Dallon. That's it. That's the Twitter handle.
At Nathan Dallon. It's a good follow, a good guy, smart as shit. Thank you very much. Bobby's got one thing. Go.
Yeah, 3 things, guys. When you're following Nate on Twitter, when you're following Tony Nash on Twitter, even when you're following Patrick DeHaas at Gas Buddy, when they say something about the administration, they are not anti-Trump. They're just saying what they see. I've disagreed with all 3 of them on things, mostly Nate, and even more than that, Gas Buddy boy, who I like. Patrick's a good guy. But they're not anti-Trump, okay? And any more than Jimmy and I are pro-Trump. We just call out what we see, so everybody lighten the frick up.
Lighten up. You people are crazy.
People are crazy.
We love a good callback joke. This is the Future's Edge show. I am Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. That's Nate Dallon, who was gracious enough to come on. But you guys are the ones who are the real stars of the shows. You always are. The support we've gotten is amazing. We appreciate it. Any DMs, any word of mouth, any retweets, thank you so much. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Independence Arc. I just had leftovers from last night. My wife had cut it up. It was delicious meat and mixed it with a little vegetables. I know Bobby doesn't eat vegetables, but it was fabulous. I just had it before I came on. Vegetables. Yeah, I don't know. It's for weirdos. But anyway, thank you guys.
Independence Arc's chuck roasts, and I just threw it in a slow cooker with butter and organic bone broth, grass-fed bone broth, and salt and pepper. And 6-7 hours later in the slow cooker, it's one of the best roasts you'll ever have.
This is just amazing.
Making me hungry, guys. Making me hungry.
By the way, Independence Arc always makes me hungry. Contact Marco there. He will fix you up. This has been the Future's Edge. I'm going to my restaurant where we don't yet serve Independence Arc, but I'm working on it.